Oh, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. This is the Contemporary Music Centre in Dublin. I'm Linda O'Shea Farren, and I'm joined by our director, Yvonne Ferguson, and many of my colleagues, including Keith Fennell here. We are privileged to have our fellow Irishman, Robert Farhat, or Rob as he's known, here joined us today to talk about developing an audience, which is a very, very important topic for contemporary music and all music, and a topic that CMC has consistently addressed, including in conferences in the past. Rob, as I said, is an Irishman. He's a music programmer, manager, and artist mentor. He's a proud Dub of Iranian and Armenian heritage. I've known Rob from early childhood. I won't embarrass him to tell you how long I've known him, but he has been a wonderful pianist and viola player, went on to be a conductor, was auditor of Trinity Orchestra, set up an Ensemble company where he produced records. He has been head of Trinity Societies, where he ran all sorts of 100 event gigs, and he also started the yearbook in Trinity. He was also very involved in the Web Summit when it was a startup, including in particularly the Night Summit, which was the arts and culture sort of gig around the summit. He has an enormous footprint in the music community here in Dublin, and we're lending him to you in London for a little while, but we do hope he comes back. His dad is one of our own CMC represented composers, Rob Farhat, who is also head of music in Trinity. So he comes from a long line of fantastic musicians. Rob is now, since 2018, with Sirius in London, and he has a huge job over there that spans talent development and also concert and festival programming. And I know for a fact, because he's been incommunicado, that he's fresh from the London Jazz Festival for the past, I don't know, 10 days or something. I don't think he's had any sleep, where he has been working very hard on it. Rob is going to now tell us all his sort of, let's say, gems of information about audience development, and I ask you to give him a warm welcome.
Very much, Linda. Appreciate it. Yeah, it was a very humbling introduction, and yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to give this talk. Yeah, so I'm kind of going to run through basically kind of different aspects of the music industry and how I would generally recommend navigating it as an artist, from kind of like self-releasing to working with labels and managers and the like, and all with the goal of building an audience. But you know, it's very much from a kind of a industry kind of insider kind of point of view. I don't have slides or anything like that. I'm going to just kind of go through things topic by topic, and then I will also share with Linda the notes that I've written up so that she can share them with all of you, so you can kind of have a bit of a summary of what I've put together. But also I'm going to keep it kind of as general as possible in terms of, you know, trying to, you know, look at how I would apply, you know, the kind of principles to any kind of artist, be it like a classical composer or a, you know, commercial pop artist. You know, I think there are general principles that apply to all kinds of musicians, and the more musicians learn from each other, you know, in terms of different genres, etc., the better. And but obviously, you know, there will be kind of like specific, you know, quirks to certain types of artists or certain types of musicians, and I welcome people's questions. You know, I'm going to talk for maybe about 20 minutes or so, and then I'd like to open up to as much Q&A as possible, because I think that's where we really get into kind of more in-depth discussion. And you know, don't be afraid to ask questions that you might feel like, you know, only specifically apply to yourself, because actually you'll find that, you know, others will learn from the, you know, from those questions and from whatever. I'm not going to say answers, because there are no right answers, to be honest, in the music industry. That's one thing that, you know, need to be very clear about. You know, there are lots of ways to go about building a career, building an audience. There's no one right way. Anyone who tells you there is like one right way of doing things is lying. You know, you shouldn't trust those kind of people. You know, there's no one right way of doing things. And to be quite honest, you know, there's nobody in the music industry has like a magic solution, because there is none. Like it's a really complex kind of system, and it's it's not very, like, the music scene, the music industry is not a very well organized industry. Quite frankly, it's in some ways it's still quite outdated in how it works. So yeah, there are no magic solutions to anything. And what I'm going to talk about are kind of based on my observations and my experience, both in both kind of working on quite a DIY level in Ireland, and then moving to London and working on a more kind of established level. But I don't claim to have all the solutions. We just kind of work our way through things and do give whatever kind of advice we can based on our experience. Just in terms of my own background, as Linda mentioned, I was a classically trained pianist and violinist, and then kind of switched to viola. Was studying classical piano very actively, and really thought I was going to pursue it as a career for a while when I was a teenager. But my own musical interests kind of started diverging from the kind of education I had. I became interested in all kinds of music, and found the education I had, I guess, somewhat kind of limiting and conservative. I had a very high quality education, no doubt about it, but it didn't really match my kind of musical interests. I became very open-minded and curious about other forms of music, and forms of music that don't fit into neat categories. So I studied. When I finished school, I did a 1-year diploma in music performance in the academy, in the Royal Academy of Music, but decided after that it definitely wasn't for me. And so then I went to university to study philosophy, politics, economics, and sociology. And I didn't pay that much attention to my degree, to be honest. But while I was in university, I got re-involved in organizing music events, and in particular by running the Trinity Orchestra. And that's where I kind of realized I had a bit of a knack for kind of the more promotional and organizational side of music. And also kind of started, I guess, trying to kind of like break down boundaries between different genres of music. So by doing kind of orchestral or arrangements of music by the likes of Radiohead and Daft Punk, which were quite successful. And so that kind of was like the start of my kind of like path, I suppose, to doing what I do now. I then worked for a certain Irish tech conference called the Web Summit, which where I was primarily doing marketing. And I guess I learned a lot of useful marketing kind of methods and techniques that I was then able to apply to music stuff later on. And then, so I did that for about a year and a half, and then I started a music company called Ensemble Music with my kind of long-running friend and colleague, Rob Farhat. Ensemble was a company that gave kind of all-encompassing support to emerging artists who we were really passionate about, but in particular working with artists who we felt were kind of like breaking down boundaries, and we're kind of lacking in support in the kind of existing support systems in the Irish music world. So some of those artists included like Loa, Rusangano family, Kirkos Ensemble, and the late Conor Walsh. And we did that for about almost 4 years, and thought we made some decent inroads into the music scene in Ireland and had a lot of successes, but ultimately found that like Ireland was too small to really be able to sustain a career doing something that niche, and we kind of struggled with funding opportunities, etc. And so eventually kind of realized that we were kind of hitting a limit in terms of how far we could take things just in Ireland. And so I moved to London, where I started working for a company called Sirius, who are, I guess, the leading live promoter producer of jazz music in the UK. We also work in kind of contemporary music, folk music, experimental music. And my role there is a mixture of programming. So I do a lot of programming for the London Jazz Festival and other events and smaller festivals throughout the year. My kind of main focus is on emerging talent and I guess, again, kind of experimental boundary pushing artists that are kind of my where my passions lie. And I also run Sirius's talent development programs. So in the UK, we have a lot of kind of funded, structured programs that give mentorship and opportunities to emerging talent. Something that Ireland is really lacking. So yeah, I run those for Sirius as well. I still, I've been based in London for almost 3 years now. I've been based in London for 3 years, and I've still tried to kind of maintain connections with the Irish scene, support Irish artists in getting opportunities for them in the UK, and I also have been, especially more recently, been quite active in advocating for reform of arts funding and policy in Ireland, particularly around making funding and policy more inclusive of ethnic minorities. I'm also a big believer in gender equality initiatives in the arts, such as Sounding Feminists. In the UK, we have one called Key Change, which is it's actually become like a worldwide program now to encourage festivals and music organizations to reach gender equality by 2022, I believe, which is proving quite successful. So yeah, I mean, that's the kind of arts policy stuff isn't something I specifically came to talk about, but I'm happy to talk about that in the questions later on if we have time. So yeah, I'm going to just kind of go through. Let me just bring up my notes. Excuse me. Go through my my kind of like, I guess, kind of step-by-step kind of guide to building a name for yourself as an artist, kind of navigating the different elements of the music industry, and some kind of, I guess, like tips and tricks and also some kind of like predictions, I suppose, for the future. And then I welcome any, if you have any questions about kind of anything as I go along that relates to kind of the topic I'm talking about. I'm happy to take questions as I go along. But then any kind of more general questions that we can maybe take at the end and have more of a wider discussion. So as I said, yeah, there really is no one right way to build an audience, to build a career, to build a name for yourself, and there are obviously kind of different paths, depending on what genre you're going down, but there are definitely some kind of universals that I think apply across the board. There are some like terms I'm going to use here that I'm not even comfortable with myself, because like ultimately I think the art is what matters, like the music itself is the most important thing, but I am going to use terms like branding and stuff like that are the reality is we live in whether we like it or not, we live in a capitalist world, and we kind of have to, as an artist, you kind of have to do your best to work within that, while staying true to yourself as an artist. I'm not going to give you any kind of artistic advice other than actually to trade. I do really believe all musicians should stay true to themselves as artists. I don't ever encourage artists to cater their work to what they think audiences would like or what the industry would like. You're not going to create your best work by doing that. You know, I think that if you've got something unique to say, you know, really, you know, stay true to yourself, and focus on the aspects of your music or your artistry that make you unique and stand out. You know, don't cater to what, you know, somebody tells you, like, you know, the music industry wants to hear or people want to hear, because you know, like, nowadays especially, there's just so much stuff out there. There's so much music out there that it's, you know, like, trying to sound like, you know, someone else, or trying to cater your sound to like a perceived taste, actually it doesn't, you know, it doesn't help you stand out. You know, that, you know, then you just blend in with everyone else. So yeah, I really always encourage artists to, you know, really, like, you know, stay true to themselves, express, you know, themselves as an artist in the truest possible way. So I'm going to first talk about, like, branding. Again, I don't like the term, but it is, you know, it's kind of a necessary way of thinking about yourself as an artist. You know, and this has nothing to do with the music itself, but with how you present yourself. Sorry, it is actually related to the music, but, you know, I don't think about branding your music itself. I'm talking about how you brand yourself as an artist. So firstly, you know, thinking about, like, what name do you use? All right. So, you know, if you're so, you know, this varies depending on whether you're a solo artist or you're making music with a group, but and it depends on what genre you're in. But, you know, think about, like, do you want to release music under your own name, under a project name, under a band name, etc.? You know, for, I think, say, those of you who are classical composers, it, you know, in almost every case, it makes sense to release music under your own name, you know, unless you have a particular, but then you might have, like, a side project, you know, that has a kind of a different angle. You know, say if you're composing music mainly for, shall we say, you know, orchestral instruments or classical instruments, but then you have a separate, you know, electronic music side project that, you know, is very different to what you're composing. You know, if what you're composing for other people, you know, you might want to consider giving that a name, like a project name or an artist name that differentiates it from your composition work for other musicians. I think then when you get into other kinds of music, like, you know, alternative, indie music, whatever you want to call it, that's where you definitely want to start thinking about using an artist name. You know, especially if your music kind of follows like a theme. So, like, you know, one artist that I've worked with very closely over the years is Loa, and you know, who's this Irish Sierra Leonean artist. And you know, when we started, she's like one of the few artists who I've worked with, you know, from the very kind of inception of her kind of career. And when we were starting off, you know, we were considering whether to use whether she wanted to use her real name or whether she wanted to put music out under a pseudonym. And she, you know, she had so many kind of, like, ideas behind the themes of her music and herself as an artist, that it made sense to create, you know, for her to create this, like, artistic kind of, like, this artistic kind of character almost, you know, which is still very true to herself, but it's you know, it also meant that she could kind of keep a bit of separation between her, like, personal life, you know, mental separation between her kind of personal existence and her artistic existence. You know, she's actually, you know, her day job is a pharmacist, you know, so having that kind of separation, I think, definitely makes sense, you know, for an artist such as her. You know, if you're, you know, I know, like, a lot of folk artists would release music under their own name, totally fine. I think it you know, it really depends on the circumstance. And, you know, if you're very much like a solo artist who writes you know, like I guess like singer-songwriter type music, again, it makes sense to release music under your own name. If your music really has a kind of a theme to it that is almost exists in and of itself, you know, then I would consider a project name or an artist name. If you're a composer who has different strands to their work, you know, then again, maybe consider, you know, do you consider having, you know, do you want to identify some of those strands by putting a name on it, you know? But again, all of that should be, I wouldn't encourage any of that, you know, all that should be very true to yourself as an artist. I wouldn't encourage kind of manufacturing these things at all. You know, it's, you know, if you don't feel comfortable releasing under a pseudonym, you know, if you feel like you're just doing it just for the sake of it, then, you know, forget about it. Like if you feel like your own name just represents what your music is, then great, do that. That's totally fine. I'm going to talk a bit about imagery. So like we live in a very visual world now, where for most people their first impression of you as an artist is actually not going to be your music, but it's probably going to be it's probably going to be what your look, all right, or your, you know, it's probably going to be a photo or an image that they see online, and getting that right is really important, and it's something that I guess maybe especially artists in the classical and jazz kind of worlds have not prioritized as much up until quite recently. And I would really think of like your design, as in your, you know, your like visual design, your photography, and your like any videos you make as part of a whole kind of like package that that represents who you are as an artist, you know, and think about how it ties into your music, and you know, the more you can present kind of like a unified image of yourself as a musician, artist, and kind of, you know, I guess again, brand, for want of a better word, the more you give people to, you know, some kind of consistent yes, it's some kind of consistent image for people to kind of latch onto. And again, when, you know, when there's just so much stuff out there, for people to be able to recognize, you know, immediately recognize that something that they see on their Instagram feed or whatever is yours, you know, based on, you know, this kind of consistent approach to imagery, and that really stands out as you, the more you're likely to kind of build on that, you know. So I'll talk a bit about online presence and social media. So like, you know, there's no doubt that you know, social media is a really important tool for reaching a wider audience, and you know, especially if you're self-managed and not working with any particular kind of industry bodies, you know, or kind of middlemen, then, you know, like your online presence is how you know, initially start building that following. And a website is really important, but it should be simple, kept simple. Like, unless you have like a massive, you know, kind of Bob Dylan-esque back catalog, all you really need as an artist is a one-page website, you know, which covers like your releases, your upcoming gigs, your, you know, bits of press, and, you know, like a website builder like Squarespace can do that for you easily enough. You know, anyone can build a pretty well presented website using some of the Squarespace or Wix these days. But yeah, you know, you want to think of like your website as, you know, like almost like just you know, a comprehensive flyer that has everything, that has like everything in one place, but you don't make it too complicated. And make sure, of course, you have your contact details on it for people to be able to reach out to you, or you can use a contact form if you like. But if someone from the music industry wants to get in touch to book you for a gig, or to reach out to you to start working together, they're really less likely to use one of those contact forms. So I would definitely suggest having your actual email address in there. And of course your links to your social media pages, which I'll go through now. So in terms of social media, the biggest platform still is Facebook, but it is definitely becoming less and less relevant. Especially to younger audiences, really don't engage with Facebook that much anymore. Older audiences definitely still use it quite a bit, but it's also become really hard to get any kind of like organic reach on Facebook these days without you really do need to pay to reach as wide an audience as possible on Facebook. That being said, the Facebook advertising tools that are out there can be pretty damn useful, all right, because of the amount of information that Facebook has about its user base. You can really now like target potential new audiences. Sorry, I'm just going to turn off my notifications. You can really target you can really target find potential new audiences by targeting, doing targeted advertisements based on interests. So like, so when I could go into a whole detailed presentation just on this topic itself, but when you're doing, if you're looking at doing kind of Facebook advertising, what we really recommend is not going for very specific interest groups. So if rather than kind of targeting people who just like music, or that's actually such a broad group that's not going to be very useful for you. Okay, what you want to do is target people who like specific artists who are relevant to yourself. So whereas the kind of suggestions that Facebook give you for target groups, they want you to target as broad a group as possible, because that way you'll spend more money. But it's actually a waste of money. Like, you want to go into very specific kind of micro targeting of different groups that are super relevant to the music you're making. I think what Facebook is still useful for in particular is for events. Personally, it's the only thing that I still use Facebook for myself, and I'll get on to kind of events later, but yeah, for getting people to
history, first published by Penguin in 2018.
We'll mute that. That's the one thing that Facebook definitely still is really useful for. Moving on to Instagram. Instagram is definitely the kind of most engaged platform right now, kind of across like younger and older generations. It is definitely, I think, where people will go to kind of like, I guess, get a sense of you as a artist from a visual point of view. So making sure that, again, thinking about that branding and the imagery that you have for yourself as an artist, and for your releases. And so I would certainly recommend not posting on Instagram too much, making sure that you have like that the posts that you do, as in like the newsfeed posts you do, are really high quality imagery, but then using Instagram stories to post more regularly and have that kind of more regular engagement with people. Twitter is one of the much less important than those two. I think Twitter is where like you get more kind of people who are really involved in the music industry are on Twitter and kind of having conversations between themselves, and it's where you get like journalists and yeah, basically music industry kind of professionals kind of are highly engaged on Twitter. The wider audience is on Twitter is not that engaged with the music industry or like with musicians, and it's definitely the least important of them. But I think in terms of like kind of making, you know, staying kind of staying on top of like kind of music industry conversations, Twitter is really useful, but it's not one you have to put a huge amount of effort into in terms of like building an audience on. I think it's the least important of them. Right now, Instagram is the most relevant in terms of building an audience, and but you know, these things change constantly, and like the next one I'm going to go to is actually TikTok, which like most of us probably don't use, and you know, at the moment TikTok's user base is very young. It's you know, quite a kind of like it's a very like ephemeral kind of platform, but you know, I wouldn't, you know, we shouldn't turn our nose on it. You know, like it's a very innovative company that could well, you know, it could well be on its way to taking over Instagram as the most important platform. So it's also actually, you know, very much a music-based platform. So I would imagine right now for most people on this call, it's not really on their, you know, part of their you know, plans, and you know, I don't personally use it myself, but I wouldn't write it off. It's you know, it's kind of catching up with quickly with the other platforms, and it may well be kind of the most important one to use in a year or two. But the kind of, you know, the old faithful kind of, and actually the most engaged kind of, or yeah, the most kind of direct way to engage with the audience is still through an email newsletter. It is, yeah, it is like, you know, that is still how you can really kind of engage directly with your audience. And so it's really important to build a newsletter as much as possible, like a mailing list as much as possible. So that's through making sure you have it as a prominent, have it sign up as a prominent sign up box on your website. You know, reminding people to sign up on your social media posts. You know, if you're organizing your own gigs, you know, encouraging people to sign up to your newsletter when they buy tickets, and also, you know, if you're selling music through Bandcamp, you can add an option for people to sign up to your newsletter when they buy your records through that. And I wouldn't recommend sending a huge amount of newsletters. I would say only send one when you have something new to announce. But yeah, they, you know, you can, like, I think especially with artists newsletters, people are still really, you know, open rates tend to be quite high with newsletters from artists, and you don't need to go into like super fancy, you know, kind of like HTML based newsletters. Like a plain text newsletter can be just as effective as a, you know, a super complex designed newsletter, you know, coming directly from an artist. It almost feels more personal if it is kind of more of a plain text type newsletter, you know. So yeah, that's kind of a rundown of you know, your online presence and social media. I mean, there's one other kind of platform that actually I haven't mentioned. I wonder, can anyone guess what it might be? Another really important online platform. Say in the comments if you think you know. Yeah, yes, yeah. So YouTube, yeah, YouTube is super important for your videos. I will get to that when it comes to releasing music. But actually, the one I was thinking of was Wikipedia. So Wikipedia is like, you kind of know an artist has kind of reached a certain level of recognition when they have a Wikipedia page built for them. You know, now it's like kind of against you know, it's kind of against Wikipedia's, I guess, like kind of philosophy to build your own Wikipedia page, but you know, do a Google search for any major artists, and their Wikipedia page is almost always one of the top search results, if not the top search results. You know, so I'll come to YouTube when it comes to releasing music. Bandcamp
Rob,
as well.
can I just get in on Wikipedia?
Yeah.
I do know that when Sounding the Feminist started up,
yeah.
they decided to have a Wikipedia kind of a thon, maybe is what it's called.
Yep.
So that, because an awful lot of women in particular are left out of Wikipedia, and I know you're a big feminist yourself, and they decided that, you know, there's always somebody who's going to write about men. So I think what they were trying to encourage is that women write about other women, not do Wikipedia pages for themselves, but that they each just do it for each other randomly. Somebody you admire, just do it. So that's a kind of an active program that can be pursued. That is perfectly reasonable.
Brilliant. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so you know, if you're, you know, working as part, you know, with other artists as part of a collective like that, you know, building websites for each other or building Wikipedia pages for each other, is a really nice way to kind of support your community.
Excuse me, may I make an interruption, please?
Yeah, of course.
I did set up a Wikipedia page for myself a while ago, but it got bounced, but it got struck off. Do you have any quick info, advice on how on how to actually get it across the line?
I'm not a Wikipedia expert, I'm afraid. No, I'm sorry. Does anyone else have any Wikipedia kind of insights that could answer Owen's question there? No, I'll take it. Okay, no. Sorry, Owen.
Thanks, man.
Right. So moving on to, you know, putting on your first gigs and releasing your first music. So obviously, you know, so the advice I'm going to give in terms of gigs is kind of COVID aside, but I will talk about COVID a bit later on. But when it comes to putting on gigs, I think it's I think before when you're just really just starting off, before you've released anything, I think playing as many shows as possible as you get asked to do is totally fine. I think once you start releasing music, that's when you want to start like being a lot more selective about what gigs you do and how often you play. Especially in your hometown. So be it Dublin or London or wherever any of you are based, it can be very tempting to play a lot where you're based, but it is. I would really recommend being more strategic and doing less gigs in your hometown, but making each one you do really special. You know, and basically it's kind of a less is more kind of approach, and you know, it looks much better to have done 2 sold out shows in Dublin in a given year than to have done, you know, 10 shows that were, you know, kind of like where only 50 people showed up or whatever, you know. So and you know, tying your gigs to a release or to some sort of, maybe be it could be a new collaboration or a new project, so that you really make each show, especially in the city you're based, kind of a real, you know, unique event in itself. When it comes to gigging further afield, you know, I would definitely say, like, once you start releasing music, trying to do as many gigs outside of your hometown as possible is really important to start building that audience, so that you don't end up becoming kind of a big fish in your own small pond, especially when it comes to performing for Irish-based artists. I think Ireland-based artists can be kind of reluctant to come perform in the UK, in London, until they feel like they've really reached a certain level. But it's actually, doing a show in London is actually a lot less scary than you might think. It's it's quite possible to even put on your own gig in London in a small venue. You know, you don't you'd be surprised. Like you don't have to have the kind of like connections that you might think to be able to do shows in London in smaller venues. You know, like, and there will, like, COVID aside, there is always an audience there to be got in London. It's, you know, there's always a London Irish community who are eager to support Irish artists, but even beyond that, putting gigs on, like, there are small venues like Servant Jazz Quarters or the Waiting Room, who are, or like say in South London somewhere like the CLF Art Lounge, which are really open to just putting on gigs for artists that they might not know themselves, and you know, like, you'll have to pay your rental or whatever, but like it's a lot less scary than you think, and doing that early on rather than kind of waiting until you've reached a certain kind of level of recognition, I think is really important to do, because although you do run the risk of becoming like a big fish in a small pond just by focusing on Ireland alone, and then when it comes, mentally it can be much harder to then take that. If you leave it till later, it can actually be harder to take that step to doing gigs abroad, because you know, if you start playing to, you know, sold out, you know, 300 plus kind of audiences in Ireland, but then you still haven't gone to London yet, or you still haven't gone abroad yet, and you know, you're worried about playing, you know, to nobody, then it mentally actually starts getting more and more, it's seeming like more and more of a challenge, you know, to make that leap. So I would really, you know, when I look at the Irish artists over the last few years who have really built a good following internationally, they've started early. They've started, you know, by really, you know, like, you know, quite frankly, that, you know, like doing probably some pretty shitty gigs for very, you know, where they've had to kind of fund it, make it work themselves financially. Of course, I would recommend applying for Culture Ireland funding if you can build even a very small tour around, you know, 3 shows in the UK, and or you know, they are very open to funding to funding any kind of Irish work abroad. So they'll cover your travel and accommodation generally. So then you don't have to worry about covering those costs from the venues or promoters.
Rob, if I can in there again,
yep,
to say that it's also the case, and we all know this, that if you're successful abroad, you can be doubly successful when you come back home. So if you've had a gig in London, or your gigs in the UK, in Wales, or wherever, and then you come back fresh from your tour, lo and behold, you know, it can help your home audience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When it comes to releasing music, I think that, you know, there's less and less need to release an album early on. You know, I think you know, there's this kind of really romantic view of the album for artists, and don't get me wrong, if you have like a fully formed body of work that constitutes an album that you feel ready to put out, do it. You know, I still say, you know, do whatever is artistically right and true for you, but you know, aiming to release an album as quickly as possible really isn't necessary anymore. The way people discover music, the way people listen to music is so much now based on it, sadly in my view, but it in reality is based on individual songs, on individual tracks. So you know, that they find through Spotify or through online platform, other online platforms, that, you know, I starting by releasing individual tracks or an EP is totally fine, if not kind of I would say recommended until you're really ready to put out like a very much, you know, fully formed body of work that you would call your first album. In terms, you know, even before you're ready to release an official kind of track, you know, like, you know, if you're, you know, when it comes, you know, if you haven't built the material, or if you just, you know, if you don't feel like your material is fully formed yet, or you just don't have the finances for the studio time, starting off by releasing some well produced live videos is a really good way to start. You know, I mean, that's kind of almost replaced what used to be releasing kind of initial singles. Putting out, putting together a well-produced live video that goes on your YouTube channel. That what I would always suggest doing is putting up a like a 30 to 60 second kind of clip on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and then linking to the full version on YouTube. YouTube is still the only platform where people kind of watch videos of you know, kind of 3 minutes or more, you know, whereas Facebook, you know, Facebook people kind of and Instagram people are still very much kind of just scrolling, so they might watch a video for 30 seconds or so and then move on.
Sorry, just a question on that there,
yeah,
Rob.
Sure.
With the videos on Instagram, like I know there's an option to put up like a full length video. Would you say that that's maybe not the best plan then? Would you say it's better off give them a teaser and put it on YouTube?
I would, like you're talking about Instagram TV.
Yes, I was trying to think the name.
I would still say, at least initially, just do the teaser, and you know, you can do the like link in bio thing to the full video, so yeah, for anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about, so like you know, you put you post like a teaser of your video on your Instagram feed, and you say, you know, full thing is in the link in my bio. You can put the link for the YouTube video in your bio. More people are using that kind of like system so much now that like you'll see a lot of people have or use something like Linktree. Thanks, Merlin. Linktree, where you can have so you like a Linktree / artist name, and then you have multiple different links, you know, relating to different posts go from that can direct people to.
That's probably because you can only use one link, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And then in terms of formats, there is, you know, obviously, you know, there is, you know, still quite a debate about the merits of streaming versus digital download, physical release, etc. In terms of reaching a wide audience, I think you have to be on the streaming platforms. On you know, Spotify is the most used one in Europe, but actually Apple Music is widely used in America as well. Apple Music's listenership is almost as big as Spotify's in America, because like pretty much everyone in America has an iPhone, and whereas Spotify is definitely the biggest one here. I would say when it comes to releasing singles, getting them onto Spotify is really important. Giving yourself the best chance of getting playlisted. So now you can submit your tracks on to Spotify to be playlisted. I think you find that feature in the Spotify for Artists page that you can sign up for. Make sure you do register your Spotify for Artists account, where you can then add like your pictures and your bio and your links to your Spotify profile. When it comes to your full releases, like an EP or an album, I would actually recommend having a window where your full releases only exist on Bandcamp, so that anyone who's really engaged with you as an artist, like, will, you know, if they want to listen to your music, as you know, you listen to your full release as early as possible, then the only way they can do it is to buy it, you know, in those first couple of weeks, especially after this year, you know, with COVID destroying people's live income so much. It has really made, I think, certainly active music listeners much more aware of how terrible the streaming income from Spotify is, and Bandcamp's sales have skyrocketed, in particular thanks to the, you know, the first Friday of every month they're waiving their fees entirely, so that artists receive 100% of the income. If you can, you know, time your initial album release in, you know, just so in time for like a Bandcamp Friday, you know, you can have that, at least that initial uptake, you know, from your yep, Bandcamp Friday. No, I think Bandcamp Friday is next Friday, Keith. I think it's the first Friday of every month. Yeah, no worries. Yeah. So yes, and yeah, because basically, like Spotify's this discovery kind of benefits, it really applies to individual tracks much more than it does to albums. You know, people that discover new artists through playlists, through like their whatever Spotify's algorithm is called, and so having your full album out on Spotify the day it comes out, you know, you're not going to necessarily get the kind of the playlisting benefits from that. You get playlisted from releasing singles. So I would, you know, it's not, this isn't like a widely held recommendation, but I think having some window of exclusivity on Bandcamp, especially after the developments of this year, I would recommend that. In terms of physical releases, CDs are still, I think, relevant as something to sell. Well, it depends on the genre. In classical and jazz and folk music as well, CDs are still widely bought. In kind of more popular or you know, alternative kind of music genres, you know, the CD sales in record stores are very much on the decline, but you will still sell them at gigs. People will even just buy your CD almost as a tip after you know, after a gig, you know. So I would still recommend making CDs if, you know, if you're in the classical jazz kind of folk music worlds, then I would distribute them and sell them at record stores. Any other genres, I would just sell them at gigs. I would, you know, put them on your Bandcamp. I wouldn't go through the hassle of distribution, of getting them into record stores. And like, for the amount you'll sell, it's not worth the time and the cut that the record stores will take. Vinyl, you know,
Rob, I think as well, just the physical CDs are very well received by radio broadcast. I'm from a radio background, and like to get a CD is still of benefit in that world, because all the notes, we're the kind of nerdy people that like all the notes of where it was recorded, who recorded it, you know, who played second flute, all that kind of stuff. You know, a physical CD, if you are targeting a specific radio program, that it's still like very well received.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, like because you just don't get that kind of metadata with MP3s or with streaming, that like, especially like journalists or, you know, for want of a better word, music nerds like to see, you know, exactly who has played on your record, etc. And streaming is still useless for that. You just don't get that metadata. MP3s is kind of complicated to find that out. So yeah, definitely still relevant for kind of I guess more traditional kind of broadcast journalism kind of sources. Okay, this is taking a lot longer than I thought it would, so I'll try and kind of.
No, there's no hurry. You are the gig. You are the gig. There's no hurry. We're asking the questions as we're going.
Sure, cool.
Going.
So then when it comes to working with, so a question I get asked a lot is like, is it worth working with a label, and what stage in your career it's worth working with a label? And firstly, I would say that like, no label is better than the wrong label, and that applies to a lot of that kind of applies across the board. It applies to management. It applies to any kind of like music industry kind of middleman that you might work with. But with these days, it's more possible than ever to get your music heard without a label. Especially when it comes to at a very early stage in your career, like when you consider what what a label deal kind of entails, like a typical label deal for an emerging artist, what you might get is that they will cover the costs of production, maybe the cost of mastering, but in most cases it'll be the cost of production, promotion, and then they will want to recoup those costs, and afterwards you might have a 50-50 split after that. So when you think about that, you're still paying for the costs of recording the music, and then you're not getting a recoup. You're not seeing any of the income until the label has recouped their own costs. Given how possible it is to promote your music yourself quite effectively, I do question, it is a real question as to whether actually working with a label at that kind of early stage is worth it, especially when you think about like, when I look at the label kind of landscape in Ireland, there aren't a huge amount of labels. Firstly, I would say there, like in terms of labels that have the kind of like international clout, there's only a handful. There is kind of on the commercial end, there's like Ruby Works, who are kind of in with the major labels, but I don't think that really applies to any of you guys. On the contemporary and kind of jazz end, there's Ergodos and there's Diatribe, who are definitely well respected, but still don't have a huge international following. Really, the only label that has like a significant international following from Ireland is All City, which is the electronic music label based out of the All City record and skate shop in Temple Bar. They've released music by the likes of Onra and Damp Funk and some great Irish electronic music artists. But and don't get me wrong, there's some brilliant small DIY kind of labels that have done great work for artists. But like I'd say, unless you kind of have an existing relationship with those, where it makes like real kind of artistic sense to work together, you can do just as well self-releasing. I would, in terms of like distribution, kind of further down the line, what you may want to work towards is getting a label services deal. So there are companies like Cobalt and Believe who provide the kind of like administrative support that a label does without taking the huge cut that a label would, and without it still looks like a self-release, but you have that kind of like backing of a company that has that kind of infrastructure that a label does. I think if you were to work with a more established label, generally the best kind of label deals or label relationships for an artist happen when a label approaches them. If you pitch to a label, if you're the one kind of asking for something, then like transactionally you're kind of in a position of you're more in a position of weakness, and you're less likely to get a good deal. Whereas if you build a name for yourself through self-releasing or through releasing with like a a small label that you're kind of like that you're part of yourself, then eventually you work your way up to a more established label knocking on your door. Then you're in the position of strength where you can dictate the terms. But when it comes to self-releasing, what I would consider,
Rob, can I just get in there as well? Sure. The lawyer breaking out in me.
Yeah.
But if you are approached by a label, if you're actually that person who happens to be approached, get your own lawyer.
Absolutely.
Quick.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
These labels, no, that's really a very serious point. These labels are as the relationship is not arm's length. So if you're approached, by definition, you're of interest to them. And as Rob says, that's a rare and unusual occurrence. So first things first, get a good entertainment law lawyer. Yeah,
100%. Yeah, I mean the jargon that some of these labels use, I actually recommend. I would really recommend people watch. The comedian Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle put out a video the other day called "Unforgiven," where he explains how he got fucked over by Comedy Central with his show, the Dave Chappelle Show, and it's actually really relevant to anyone in the entertainment industry. You think of Dave Chappelle, like one of the most famous comedians alive, right? But while he was still young and kind of naive, he signed a contract with one of the big TV channels for comedy that basically sold his rights away. And he's even though the show that made him famous is being streamed across like HBO and Comedy Central, and it was on Netflix, but he got them to take it down. He's not earning a penny from that. So so yeah, like a good lawyer is really important. There are a couple of kind of music and entertainment specialist lawyers in Ireland, but there's a good few in the UK who I mean I didn't I personally didn't kind of realize how important a role that was until I moved to UK and saw how active music lawyers are over here in like getting label deals for artists. And you get artists now who don't have a manager but work with a music lawyer. So yeah, really good point, Linda.
I worked in New York for 10 years, as you know, and I did entertainment law myself over the years a bit, but I also had many friends in the business. And that's why they hire talent scouts, guys. They pay the talent scouts to find the people who are going to be famous before they become famous and to grab them. So, let's not be naive. There could be somebody on this call to whom it's extremely relevant. So don't want to overdo the point, but if you're approached, get the lawyer.
But when it comes to self-releasing, what I would consider investing some money into is PR. So firstly, I wouldn't recommend paid PR in Ireland, except for in very kind of like extreme circumstances, shall we say. I think in Ireland, the music press world is so small that you can gradually build those relationships yourself. And I'd say it's only necessary to pay someone to do your publicity in Ireland if you're when you're really trying to kind of reach like a massive kind of national audience for like a really big project, or if you're trying to get onto the Late Show or something. Like it may feel, if you're just starting off and you don't have any connections in the music press or arts press, it may feel like, oh, you can pay someone to sort it out for you, but actually you can build those relationships and connections yourself over time. Like, and I don't think it's a necessary investment to pay for PR in Ireland. In the UK though, it is really hard to penetrate to kind of like national music press without having someone someone dedicated working on it for you. Especially like the kind of broadsheet newspapers, the BBC radio stations, and I would say that radio is still super important in the UK. Like it can really make or break an artist in the UK in a way that like maybe is not quite as influential anymore in Ireland. You know, in the kind of alternative music world, like Radio 6 is hugely influential, and you know, unless you have some personal collections yourself, it's very hard to get in with any of those presenters without a radio plugger. For the kind of contemporary classical music audience, Radio 3 has some still very important radio shows like you know, Lake Junction, and so yeah, and then on the kind of blogging front, you know, having an online PR kind of specialist pitching to the online blogs, you know, has made a massive difference to some Irish bands over the last few years. You know, someone like Girl Band, who eventually signed to Rough Trade, you know, they initially got that kind of traction in the UK through paying for PR with a company called Prescription PR, who are really good. It is quite a, you know, it can be quite a big outlay. You know, you're talking like very minimum £1,000, £1,000 to kind of get any kind of decent results, but you know, as much as, you know, 2,000 plus. But and initially, you know, it's not like you're going to see that the return on that, like the financial return on that investment, you know, initially. You know, it's really about kind of building building a name for yourself in the UK, and you know, kind of having that kind of initial kind of seed of you know, of coverage in the UK, so that then you can use that to get gigs or to, you know, to pitch to any PR companies you'd recommend. So yeah, I mean, so some good ones would sorry, I'm just seeing the questions here. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the kind of music you're releasing, but for kind of alternative music, I would say Prescription. For kind of contemporary classical music, I would say Wildcat PR is really good. For jazz, what's his name again? Baxter PR is really good. Yes, Merlin, Will McCarthy is really good for folk. Any other kind of specific niches anyone wants to know about? I can include
free improv.
I haven't a clue.
Free improv. I mean, the free improv. I would say actually I would say paid PR is probably not necessary for free improv. The kind of journalists who cover free improv probably, like I would know a lot of them personally, and they kind of actually probably turn their nose at paid PR. So I would say, you know, there's like a handful of journalists, like, you know, like Daniel Spicer, who is a writer for Jazzwise and The Wire, you know, like just getting on to, you know, when it comes to stuff that niche, you know, you can actually just, you know, there are really only a handful of key journalists who cover it. Even on the radio front, there's a newish radio show on Radio 3 called Freeness, which is they constantly talk about how open they are to receiving submissions. So and that was actually going to bring me on to
before you go on, Rob, can I just mention that in a previous series we had a similar series to this in July with different topics, but it was one of them was a three-part series on online performances, and Naomi Belshaw of Wildcat, she gave us a big presentation.
Great.
That's up on our YouTube channel, so please feel free to tap into it.
Naomi's brilliant. Yeah, Naomi works for Wildcat, which was the one I recommended for contemporary classical music. R&B soul, I would say, you know, Baxter, who I mentioned for jazz, would actually be good for that. Also Prescription would be, they kind of cover anything that you would generally categorize as any kind of popular music. But you know, if you can't afford that, you know, if you're just starting off and you don't, you know, I would say hold off on going for the paid PR route until you're releasing, you know, kind of something very significant. You know, if you're just talking about like an initial single or initial track, then like a lot of these publicists would say themselves, you know, they would like to have like a body of work to be able to kind of work on a kind of longer campaign with you, rather than just working on a single track here and there. Look, some of the online radio stations in the UK have become extremely widely listened and influential now, like NTS being kind of the most important one. Also, Worldwide FM, Bellamy, and what you can do with those is, I mean, a lot of those presenters would be open to hearing from artists. And what I would recommend doing is, so like with NTS, for example, which has a huge amount of different presenters covering a wide range of music, but what you can do is you can actually go to the NTS website, search for artists who make music kind of that you'd say is similar to your own, or you can even search for like specific subgenres and see what presenters have played music by those artists or in those subgenres, and then contact those presenters, knowing that they're interested in what you're doing. You know, I would never recommend just doing kind of blanket emails to like every press contact you can think of under sun. You know, like if you're doing your own press, then pinpointing individuals who you know are interested in the kind of music you're making, and tailoring your approach to each one based on, like, you know, the kind of, you know, knowing the kind of music that they've supported or played in the past, is a much better use of your time than just trying to find the contact info for like every presenter under the sun. I'll just say a quick thing about management, and then I'll just open the floor to any further questions. So again, you know, management, firstly, you know, so I've been an artist manager in the past, and it's a very I would say it's a very loose term that can mean anything, really. You know, like managers do anything and everything under the sun, depending on what the artist needs or depending on their own skill set. But again, it's really not, you know, there isn't, you know, there's this kind of like romantic kind of view that like, oh, if I get a manager, they'll fix everything for me. And it's really, it doesn't really work like that. And also I would say, you know, there are actually very few good managers out there. There are very few managers, period, in Ireland, especially ones who work outside of the kind of very commercial music worlds. I mean, when I was doing artist management in Ireland, to be quite frank, I was totally making up as I went along. I had, you know, there was no real guidance for young managers like myself, and you know, that still is kind of the case. Definitely, I would say no manager is better than the wrong manager. You know, it's especially for, I think, artists like yourselves who I'm sure aren't trying to go down a very kind of commercial music path. You know, having a manager who really understands and believes in you as an artist is much more important than having someone who's like super experienced and like thinks they like know everything about how the music industry works, because they don't, because the music industry is constantly changing. But you know, the best managerial relationships come about organically. They you know, very rarely, I think, it comes from an artist approaching like an established manager. If an established manager approaches you as an artist, you know, you want to think about, like, really, you know, are they doing that for the right reasons? Are they do they believe in you as an artist? Do they like believe in your vision, rather than trying to implant their own kind of idea of what you should be doing based on their kind of past experience? Working with, you know, a young person, like a young enough manager who you know, you already have an existing relationship with, who really believes in you or really understands you as an artist, is a much better way to go than working with someone who supposedly knows the ropes, you know. But you know, in the absence of that, because like, because I know for musicians, there's just so much to think about. It's like before you even get to like making music itself, which is ultimately like what is most important for you guys. Like, I would really recommend looking at working with someone who can at least help you with your admin, help you with your social media, help you with project management. May not take the role of a traditional manager who takes the typical 20% or whatever, but someone you can pay on a kind of retainer basis or on a project basis, and factor that into funding applications as well, so that to lighten your own administrative loads, so that you don't have to always be the one doing all your social media, etc. And and I find more and more established artists aren't working with traditional managers anymore, because well, there aren't that many good managers out there, and there are more and more artists trying to kind of break through. So but having someone who's organized or who's good at social media or good at kind of project management, who you can work with to at least help you keep organized, or do some of the kind of like non-artistic work, so you can focus on what you're actually good at, which is creating and performing music. Yeah, that's something we recommend. Just kind of to wrap up, I know this has been a really tough year for musicians, for everyone in the arts, but in particular for artists. It's I really feel for everyone, and but I really do think there is actually a lot of cause for optimism. I think, I mean, firstly, like the signs are pretty good with these vaccines, that at least that there is light at the end of this tunnel. But more generally, kind of, or more like philosophically, I think this year has really made this year has really made people, the kind of the wider public, kind of remember recognize what are the important things in life, and what they're missing by not being able to engage with art and music in a kind of a live setting. And I think that once things do start getting back to some sort of normal, there's going to be a wider appetite than ever, really, to support artists and to engage with live music. I think also people have realized how little artists earn from their recorded music, and are doing more to buy artist music, but also are going to be more keen than ever to support live music when it comes back. And certainly in Ireland, it's very encouraging also the increase in funding for the arts, the increased budget the Arts Council got, and then the live recording, or the recording scheme that was rolled out. So I think there are a lot of, as tough as this year has been, I think there's a lot of cause for optimism, and once we start going back to a kind of some sort of more normality, I think that the landscape will be actually eventually kind of a lot more healthier for artists, and there will be a lot greater kind of recognition and support for the work that artists do amongst the general public. So yeah, if we can all just ride out this storm, I think we'll actually come out of it hopefully in a much more kind of healthy and artistically kind of vibrant place. So yeah, that's kind of all I have to say, really. But yeah, I mean, yeah, any further questions, I'd love to. I'm very happy to chat further.
Yeah. Sorry, Linda, if you want to go first.
No, I just want to thank you for what was, without a shadow of a doubt, a sort of an amazing roundup from start to finish of the young person who start gigging in their bedroom to right through to being approached by labels. And I I know that everybody, all my colleagues in CMC, Yvonne and Keith are on the line, but everybody else, you know, is quite encouraged by the funding. I think it's nice that you ended with that positive note. CMC was very involved in trying to make sure that contemporary music was included front and center in that. And I know that every other genre of music, that's the great thing. We're trying to create a platform across all genres. So we're a united front. So I just wanted to thank you, but questions now, please jump in.
Pleasure.
Sorry, I just had a question in terms of the current climate we're in, I suppose. Yep. I know it's new for everybody and nobody really knows how to navigate it, but as an artist who maybe wants to release something and wants to engage with an audience, like how would you advise someone to do that when you can't really put on a real live show?
Yeah, right now. Yeah, I mean, firstly, you know, I would say, you know, I don't buy into the, you know, I haven't agreed with some of the people in the music industry who say, oh, you should, you know, hold off on releasing anything, you know, like because of what, you know, because of the climate at the moment, you know, because, you know, even with the vaccine coming, you know, we don't know exactly when things are going to get back to normal, and people still, you know, people are still listening to a lot of music, you know, but it's just that, you know, they can't engage with live. I would say, you know, if you, in terms of putting a release out and marking it, you know, in some sort of kind of, you know, to launch it in some sort of way, like, you know, I do think that while there has been like a deluge of streams, I do think that doing one well-produced live stream, you know, during this period, if it ties in with a release, I think is definitely justified, you know, and what you can even do is, you know, have some sort of like bundle where, you know, you sell tickets for your stream that, you know, alongside a you know, a download of the album or a physical copy of the album, you know. Yeah, so, you know, you're not getting people to pay for the streams on its own, but, you know, people watch the stream by purchasing a copy of the album or release. I would, what was the other thing I was going to say? I mean, if you're considering doing live streams, I would advise against doing them live, as in like trying to record and broadcast live just adds an extra layer of complexity and just the potential for things to go wrong. But like to record as live performance, it doesn't need to, you know, like a good 30 minutes, you know, rather than a really long one. And then, you know, seeing that as like your launch event, which you promote the way you would promote a gig alongside the album. Yeah, that's what I would suggest.
Cool, thank you.
Yep, no problem,
Emma, you have your hand up. Go for
I'm
it.
sorry, Linda. I always have the hand up in
I
meetings.
really love hearing from you.
I'm the most annoying person on the planet. And Rob,
that second flute that you were talking about.
Rob, I was in Trinity when you were born.
Okay.
And your father taught me orchestration. I wanted to ask, so your advice has been absolutely brilliant. Thank you. First of all, to reinforce, I moved to the UK 20 years ago. It is actually easier to get concerts here than it was in Ireland. Without a doubt. Within a year of getting here, I was in Lincoln Early Music Festival. I was sent over to Carl's. The opportunities here are it's completely different environment.
Yeah, and it's like knowing the right people is actually less important in the UK than in Ireland, because it's so much bigger. You know, you don't have the same kind of like, you know, in Ireland that you know, there you tend to get these kind of like maybe a bit too cozy relationships where gatekeepers just work with the same people again and again, you know, and it's really hard to break through that. In the UK, you know, or even just London on its own, it's so much bigger, and there's so much more of a kind of a churn as well, because people come and go a lot more in London, and it is kind of a more open system. Sorry, anyway.
So I've actually, London is next to me, so I've played in Tokyo and Sofia in the last 2 years. But I haven't done, so I've got a London-based pianist now. He was in Piano Circus. He was the founder member.
Nice,
So
yeah.
a lot of experience. What I want to ask though, I've got a CD release coming out next year, and I was approached. I'm not paying for it myself, which is amazing.
Great.
Does it make a difference in terms of getting reviews? Because there are a lot of CD vanity presses out there that you can just pay, and then someone like Gramophone or BBC Music Magazine would probably question the credibility of that.
To pay for what? Sorry, now.
Well, there are a lot of labels now where you just basically almost like a vanity press. So do the magazines and that see label like NMC is established, for instance, so or Chandos or any of those. So someone like Gramophone or BBC Music Magazine would expect to review those. Yeah. But there must be a disadvantage to not having an established label if you want to get reviewed, or is there?
I mean, maybe with those kind of more traditional music press sources. I mean, I think that like if you have a good publicist, I think you definitely need a good publicist to get into those kind of magazines. If you unless you have some personal connection with a critic there. I mean, like with those magazines tend to need like to receive copies months in advance. I couldn't really speak for Gramophone or BBC Music Magazine, but I'm thinking of like the kind of equivalents in the jazz world where I kind of mainly work, so like Jazzwise or The Wire. I mean, if you're self-releasing and if they're already aware of you, then you know, if you get your album out to them early enough, I think they would review it. But I think I certainly, in terms of the kind of vanity label idea, I mean, I certainly think like working with a good, you know, paying a good publicist is probably more effective than working with like a small label just for the sake of it, you know.
Yeah, I'm considering giving Naomi a call, Linda. That's next on the list.
Yeah.
And I think bloggers too, for self-releases, bloggers might be a better bet than the big, you know, that's my own feeling. But would you agree, Rob?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Now, there's two questions in the chat for you, Rob, and we have another hand up, but one of the questions was quite a bit a while ago. It was by Merlin Driver, asking, do you know if there's a price difference between publicity for a digital compared to a physical release? Is there much of a price difference?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the kind of, what kind of campaign. Like if you mean like, so you mean whether you're releasing your own music digitally or physically? Like officially probably not, but I think a publicist would probably say that, oh well, like with a physical release, they would say they have more to work with and would charge more. In principle, there shouldn't be any difference, but I think a publicist would probably see a physical release as a bigger campaign and charge more. Also, whether I think a physical release makes it more likely that like a broadsheet or like a magazine will cover something than a digital only release. So yeah, that's why I think a publicist would say there's probably more scope for them to work on a physical release, and hence they would charge more.
I think it's really around the price, and you think that the price will be built into that. Is it all of that kind of stuff is built into the price? That's the problem. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it's like the amount that publicists charge, you know, it tends to be like how they come up with that amount is a bit of a dark art as far as I can tell. But like, yeah, I think they will see a physical release as a bigger campaign.
Okay. And another question from Matthew Whiteside was about Patreon. Now, again, that was covered in our monetizing on performances. So that's going to be in our YouTube July CPD as well. But you probably have some views on Patreon yourself.
I mean, I think Patreon is a great platform. Firstly, I see it as more useful for like collectives or artist collectives than individual artists, because I think with what you kind of need to have with Patreon is like quite a regular kind of output in order for, you know, as rewards or whatever for, I mean, you know, sorry, you can just you can just get people to support you on Patreon with no particular reward, just for people to support you. Some people will support you just purely to support an artist. But I think to use Patreon effectively, you want to have some sort of like regular output that your patrons will receive for becoming a supporter. In which case, that's a lot of pressure to put on an artist to like put out a new video a month or something. Whereas that could be more achievable with a collective of artists or a grassroots organization of some kind. But I mean, I think it's definitely worth exploring, and maybe that other talk will have more insight on that.
Marilyn, you had your hand up, but I don't know whether it was that question, the older question, or do you have another question?
No, I had given up on the other question being answered. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, man.
Now I feel I'm cheating, having two questions.
Not at all. Please do.
Rob, thank you for such a wide-ranging talk.
No
and I just want to say, first of all, thank you, Rob. You gave me the nicest rejection email I've ever had once for a serious project, and it was genuinely the only email I've got that made me feel good. Ever a rejection email that made me feel good. And when I did my open call for making tracks this year, I had 140 something people applying. I kind of used your rejection email as a template for my, and I responded to every person. Yeah. It was really interesting process. So thank you again for that email. I assume you wrote it.
I think so. Yeah, for Take 5, was it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I remember,
and my question is quite general, and I hope not too self-indulgent. But the context is that I'm a songwriter and also a creative producer of Making Tracks, which is an international music exchange program. And I released an EP.
It's a brilliant program.
Yeah, well, it's getting there. I released my own EP in 2017, and it got some radio play. And suddenly, for about a year, that was the only time in my life I've mostly been known for being a musician. And then the Making Tracks opportunity came along, and it was a good opportunity to get a consistent income of approximately 10 grand per year, which doesn't exist in music so much. So I took that opportunity. But I fear that, especially with COVID, that's something that the lost momentum is something that we're all feeling with COVID. But I was already feeling it with in my situation, because I fear that I'm quickly becoming a creative producer who once released an EP rather than an independent musician who happens to run Making Tracks, which is what I really want to be, and I don't want to give up on my music. So, but at the same time, because it's been 3 years now, everything I seem to apply for, whether it's PRS or Open Fund this year or Help Musicians UK Do It Differently Fund, I find that I'm probably in this difficult situation where they're saying, it's a bit of a vicious circle where they want to see that I'm active and I'm doing things. And they see that it's been a bit of a delay, and I haven't been particularly active, haven't done lots of tours, so they don't give me funding. But really what I need is funding and belief to become active again. So I feel like I'm stuck. I feel like I'm really stuck at the moment. And the debut album hopefully will be out next year, but who knows, depending on income and funding and all of this.
Sure, yeah. I mean, that's definitely like you're not alone in having that kind of experience and feeling that way. Firstly, I think that COVID is kind of has kind of pushed a bit of a reset button on all those kind of expectations of, how quickly artists have to release, or, I mean, it's warped people's sense of time so much that no one can remember when an artist last put out a record. So in terms of audiences, anyway, I don't think you need to worry about that. I don't think you need to worry about the fact that it might be 4 years since, a 4-year gap between your last release and the next one. I think audiences won't question that, or won't even notice that at all. In terms of funders, I mean, you could, I mean, if you can, going back to some of the kind of suggestions in my presentation, where if you can even just on a kind of a smaller scale, start reminding the world that you exist as a musician through putting out a new video, start that kind of almost like go back to square one and start gradually building your output up again, even in video form, so that then it's not like funders, the only thing they have to look at is something from 3 years ago.
No, that's not the case.
Yeah.
I mean, I have done videos.
Yeah.
This year,
Exactly. Yeah.
This year I'm doing this silly thing where I've made a little tiny bit of music and put it on Instagram every single day of the year. I'm on 327 out of 365. But I've actually found the engagement is slowly drop as the years gone by, as the years progressed. So maybe it wasn't the best idea, but it's been an interesting thing to do.
Yeah.
No, I've been active, but still.
I think that's what Rob's saying, though. Active is the way to go, because you just don't know what's going to bite along the way. You just never know.
Gotta keep plugging.
Yeah, and tough and all as it is. Yep.
Thank you.
Matt, do you want to? Can you? You're on mute, Matt. Matt, you're on mute.
No, I can hear. Hey, Matt.
How you doing, Rob?
How you doing, man? Are you in Ireland or are you in Canada or where?
Ireland.
Are you on a cruise ship somewhere?
No, I'm back on the home soil. Myself and Rob worked in the early days of Ensemble in Ireland. I had a string orchestra project in Dublin, which was, I think, turned into an insane learning experience for me anyway. So yeah, it was
great while it lasted.
Yeah, it was. Maybe there could be a feature in that sometime. But my question is, without trying to be too general, you alluded to it earlier, talking about Spotify and that, the kind of ideological war which is going on around streaming not being a sustainable model for artists. I think unless you're at that very, very top tier, streaming just doesn't even figure in terms of your income or how you make money off music. So I guess the question is, at the moment, do you think there is there a model for artists or for groups that doesn't include streaming that might be sustainable? Is there a way you can, not use Spotify or not use those outlets and still be relevant? And I guess the follow on from that is, are we stuck with streaming now? That's more just a personal question to you. Do you have any thoughts on the future of streaming and how people consume music?
Yeah, I mean, as I kind of alluded to earlier, I would try and see streaming as a tool for people discovering your music, and that's why I would still, when it comes to your full releases, still prioritize Bandcamp. And, even I would say, like, especially in the classical jazz worlds, like, people or artists or labels are just not putting their full releases on Spotify entirely. So I do think you need to be on there. I think some of your music needs to be on Spotify for discovery purposes, but I'd certainly say, like, prioritizing Bandcamp for full length releases is a way to go. For in future, my hope is that there will be some sort of more kind of equitable streaming service that will come along. Maybe Bandcamp itself will come up with its own kind of Spotify like rival. I think it's like, unfortunately, I do think that there's no going back to, like, people en masse buying each individual release. There's just the choice that Spotify and Apple Music gives people at such a low cost is, once you give people that kind of the taste of that, it's really hard to go back. But yeah, so my hope is in Bandcamp itself, or maybe like some sort of conglomerate of, like, independent labels coming up with a rival to Spotify, or some sort of kind of more like grassroots focused, like, equitable streaming platform. Because I mean, the problem is not just the is not just like is not inherent necessarily in streaming. It's more the actual financial structure of how the streaming services work, which yeah, I mean, it's basically just, you know, essentially over the last 20 years, the size of the pie has been shrinking, but the middlemen have been taking a bigger and bigger chunk of that pie and leaving less and less to artists. So kind of an independently run, like kind of bottom up streaming service, I think is the real is what I'm hoping will emerge over the next few years. You know?
Yeah, it's a good way to think about it, more from just to think of it as a discovery tool rather than giving away your music for free.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thanks.
No worries.
We're hoping that you'll come up with that streaming alternative, Rob.
Oh,
the bottom up, wonderful rival to Spotify that you're talking about. Who knows? Any more questions, anybody? Owen, you had talked about the Wikipedia page being taken down. I mean, maybe you could consider forming a collective to put each other's pages up. That's one potential solution.
I think so. Yeah, thank you. It's just their criteria for documentation, for proof that you actually are a serious musician out there is very strict. You know, you can't link to blogs or anything like that. You would need, you know, I mean, you'd need to be reviewed, or that you're appearing somewhere in some kind of press that it's linked to. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time.
Okay,
I know nothing about it, but I do know you stand a better chance when other people are writing about you rather than you writing about you. That much, I think. Anybody else with any questions? Rob?
I mean, I see Merlin put in the comments about Bandcamp starting their own live streaming feature, which, yeah, that is encouraging. You know, like Bandcamp is definitely the most artist-friendly platform there is, and yeah, and I mean, I actually even use Bandcamp to discover new music as well, like Bandcamp's own recommendation like algorithms, but also I find Bandcamp's blog to be a brilliant source of new music, and you know, they really champion independent artists. So yeah, you know, take the live streaming platform from Bandcamp is definitely one to look at, and yeah, I think unfortunately, you know, not unfortunately, but it was understandable that when COVID first hit, there was just like a deluge of streams from people's bedrooms, and then there was a bit of fatigue kind of kicked in after that. But now I think like they were being a lot more considered about the kind of streaming shows they do, and you know, like, so I work for, you know, the company I work for runs the EFG London Jazz Festival, and we had which took place over the last over 10 days over the last 2 weekends and last week, and you know, we had planned to have like a hybrid socially distant live festival with everything living online as well. Sadly, there was a new lockdown kicked in the UK just 2 weeks before the festival started, and we had to move everything online. But like, to be honest, there were advantages to that. There were advantages to doing things online this year. We were able to have performances by artists from parts of the world who we wouldn't have been able to bring over in person. Like, we had like an amazing Turkish jazz showcase. We had showcases from like Lithuania and Switzerland and Sweden, and you know, and those, while in the past we may have brought some of those artists over, they actually probably got a bigger audience by those performances living online than they would have in person at the festival. And you know, it also meant that the festival was able to reach a much wider audience in terms of, you know, people who may not be able to make it to London, be able to experience live music. So even when live in-person events come back, I still think that some element of live streaming is here to stay. You know, well produced, some sort of hybrid model is here to stay. So keeping an eye on what Bandcamp is doing there. Yeah, I definitely will be. Yeah, Resonate. Someone mentioned Resonate. Tock. Yeah. No, I've heard of it. I haven't really looked at in much detail, but yep. Anything else?
Anybody else got any questions? happy to take them if you do. Yeah, Merlin.
Well, I did just write a question down when you were talking about the Facebook advertising doing micro-targeting.
Yeah.
I've tried this before. I found that whenever you're trying to go for quite a niche, a specific type of music, they just don't have them. Like,
yeah, so if you go super niche, I think like I've noticed that, if a page that you're like an interest that you're targeting probably needs to have at least kind of 20,000 likes on its corresponding Facebook page for it to come up. But yeah, it is doable, and yeah, it is doable. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, like but I don't really run Facebook ads anymore in the job I have now. But like in back when I was promoting shows in Dublin, like I would just set ads to run at like a budget of like €1 a day, which is like the minimum that you could spend, and like that was enough. Like a month-long like promotion campaign at €1 a day would actually you get like clear results. Yeah.
Because last year for my Making Tracks tour, I would ask people in the audience, like have chats with people, like, how did you hear about it?
Yeah.
And people say, oh, we saw an advert on Facebook. So it works. It does work.
It does, yeah.
And I did the same thing, just £1 a day.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
again, now Naomi covers that in great extent in the CPD thing she gave in July presentation, which again is up on CMC Ireland's YouTube. She gets into the kind of benefits of drilling down. So you might want to look back at that, Merlin. It's been a long session, a fantastic session, Rob. No, we're not surprised, obviously, but I know you've put in a fair share of work into this. I just want to thank you on behalf of all of us here in CMC for a great, great job. We really loved it.
Thank you.
As I said, it was a complete tour de force. And, thank you very much on behalf of all of us. And thanks for everybody for tuning in. And it'll be up on our YouTube channel, as I say, CMC Ireland. Thank you all very much.
Real pleasure. Thank you all. Nice to meet those of you I didn't know, and nice to see some familiar faces, those I did. And yeah, thanks for asking me, Linda. It's been a real pleasure.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Okay, Rob.
Nice.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See you now. Bye-bye. Bye.